Hey everyone, welcome to Friday Night Live with your host Ben. Rob can't be here tonight, but my guest host Simon Esler is. And now I'm sure, as a lot of you are aware, during the Cold War, the CIA ordered the creation of a secret program intended to find ways of mind control, MK Ultra. So Robert F. Kennedy exposed new evidence this week linking disappeared indigenous children to MK Ultra experiments conducted by CIA-sponsored researchers. So, could unethical experimentation still be going on today without people's consent? Also, in other strange news, is it possible that dinosaurs lived among us? You might be shocked to see what conclusions have been found about that. And speaking of surprising information, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg may face off in the most unexpected place that hasn't seen action for nearly 1,500 years. Rome's ancient Colosseum. Plus, there's all the massive protests happening in France. So join me and my host, Simon Esler, as we dive deeper into these topics, as well as the weekly Mandela Effect segment, the top 10 weirder news of the week, and of course, our Dig Deep live Q&A only on rise.tv. Hey, Simon, welcome.
Hey, yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me back. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you back on. So, yeah, Rob had to do some traveling for the weekend. So we asked Simon if he would want to join us. And everyone, it's always great having you on, and everyone really likes you a lot. So it's cool. It's just like you're just kind of one of us, really. So
One of us.
One of us, yes. So how are you doing?
Good. I'm just getting ready for celebrating Canada. And, the Canada Day weekend is coming up here.
When is like your official Canadian holiday?
It's on the 1st.
It's 1st of July?
Yeah.
I couldn't remember. Now that you mentioned it, I do remember that it is kind of close. So it's tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. So we're going up to the grandparents' place because my son just turned 5 on the 26th. And so we're going to do a big birthday party for him and watch some fireworks for Canada Day and all that stuff. It's nice. Very exciting. Very exciting. Going to do a staycation in Northern Ontario.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, I hope you guys have a good time for that. I'm sure
we will. We have a slip and slide.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It's so exciting.
That's awesome. Well, I guess we'll just start off because there's so much to talk about with this MK Ultra stuff and then Elon and dinosaurs. So why don't we just jump right into this Mandela effect, and then we'll kind of get started with the show here. So I did you ever watch Scooby-Doo when you were growing up?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Like the original one?
Yeah, the old school one.
Yeah, the old school one. That's way better. This is kind of fascinating because I have a feeling there's probably more Mandela effects, but so far people have been noticing two. One of them is the title itself. Now, the title was changed, as the show, like there's like the 70s show, and then it went into the 80s, and then even the 90s, and this show was the format slightly changed. The name of the actual name of the show kind of changed too. Originally it was called Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Then it was just kind of changed to like Scooby-Doo. But the question is, did it have a question mark or a explanation point at the end of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And that's what a lot of people are asking. And then on top of that, the bigger one is, did Shaggy have an Adam's apple?
This is exciting.
Yeah. So the only reason why I remember Shaggy having an Adam's apple, because I remember being in elementary school and our teacher was using that as an example because we were learning about like what is an Adam's apple. And she was like, oh, if you ever watch Scooby-Doo, you know that, Shaggy has this Adam's apple, and like she used that as an example.
Right.
And he no longer has an Adam's apple.
Okay, so that's a really vivid memory for you. Like that's a pretty darn
for
clear
this
one.
one it is. This one it is. Now I think this is like the beginning of Shaggy's one-liners. Oh, okay. This is, but see, I mean, so I pulled up the original show.
Okay.
And you will notice that in every single one of these, he doesn't have an Adam's apple. And I grew up on Scooby-Doo. So for me, this was like a very clear memory that I have, because I literally learned what an Adam's apple was by watching Scooby-Doo.
Weird.
And now that he doesn't have one, it's kind of weirding me out. So...
Is it because he's supposed to be trans?
Oh no, I have no idea.
It's one of those ones, though. It's one of those ones where, to me, it just proves that like this is some sort of random effect, that it's not like an agenda-driven thing. Really, I don't even.
Yeah,
like, I'm joking about that, but really, that's such an obscure thing. No one would manipulate that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why, I honestly think that, I really don't think anyone's going back into the past and like, oh, we're gonna erase history where Shaggy no longer has an Adam's apple, or Morpheus doesn't say, what if I told you, or something, but I think it's more of a sense of it's more like we're almost like shifted. I mean, I'm starting to believe now that we're more shifting through timelines and experiencing these different realities on these different timelines. But what's causing that is the big question. So
is it a natural phenomenon that is a part of the cycle in history that we're in, or is it as a result of human interference in the fabric of time space?
Right, and it could be a mixture of all of the above, to be honest.
Yep, could be.
Yeah, so this has definitely been very interesting.
Wow.
And I was watching recently. I was watching Bob Lazar on Joe Rogan, and I was actually listening to it on accident because I was in my car, and I was trying to find the Robert Kennedy and Joe Rogan, and like my phone wasn't working right, and this random one came on, and I thought it was it, and then I was like, oh wait, this is Bob Lazar, and it was from like 4 years ago, but I listened to it, and actually it was, it's very fascinating. I've always been kind of on the fence with Bob Lazar, but the way that Joe Rogan asks very specific, like Bob Lazar will say something and Joe Rogan will actually stop him and be like, okay, can you explain that a little bit? Or what was this like? What did it look like? Like, what color was it? And it was kind of interesting. And he's only like, Bob Lazar is only explaining what he knows. So he won't venture outside of anything that he doesn't know. But one of the things that he talked about was that he was brought on specifically to look at this piece of technology that was recovered, and his guess was from a craft. He said, honestly, they never really did explain anything. He said he saw the craft that it was from once or so, and then they worked on this thing, and he described it as almost like a okay, so for those of you that don't know who Bob Lazar is, his story is that in the early 90s, when he was like pretty like in his 20s, he worked at S4, which is around Area 51. So he said he wasn't working at Area 51, but he was working near Area 51 at S4. It is a legit base, and that's where supposedly they do all their testing for their secret craft and whatever it is. But so his story, he came out in the news. It kind of broke in the news. He said he really regretted it because it really affected his life afterwards. And he doesn't like to give a lot of interviews. Now he's they made this documentary about him. And so documentary's okay. But what's fascinating is that he was talking about this device that was like a circular ball on some kind of like base with an energy source at the bottom of it. And he described the energy source as like a mini particle accelerator that, when turned on, it like activated this, and it warped and manipulated, it like created its own gravitational field
Right.
around this. So he said, it was almost like a magnet. As you were trying to get close to it, you couldn't. It was like repelling you. And he's like, if it's in a craft and the craft is like right above you, you can't see it actually. It's like it bends the not only bends light, but it actually bends the gravity around it. And so it creates this
time space itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm bringing all this up, because he was saying that the goal of this thing was they're trying to figure out, one, like how it works, two, what does it actually do, and then three, can they replicate this? And he used the example of, be like, if we went back 400 years and dropped off an iPhone, it's like, and then the only thing they could really make out of it was maybe, you take it apart or you try to figure out what to do with it. And maybe the only thing you come up with is like glass. It's like, okay, we can make glass from this thing, and that's it, or something like that,
Yeah.
But what's fascinating, he was saying that through this, you can actually manipulate time and space, and you could essentially create some kind of like time warp where you can literally travel through time using this thing, because through the anyway. So the reason why I'm bringing all this whole thing up, and it's like, it just started making me think about the Mandela effect and how it might be a lot easier to travel through time than what we think it could be, especially if extraterrestrial or interdimensional beings are already doing this.
Well, and there's other testimony about craft with very similar technology, and they state that all that had to be done was that the ET had to vibrationally attune to the point in time space they wanted to be, and the craft would help them arrive there. And it was, it was that simple. It was like time was not really linear. It was more like a landscape. Time space itself together was a landscape you could move through. Yeah, and there's a lot there. And it's interesting because, like you said, like there's some contentiousness about Bob Lazar's testimony, because some people feel, or at least some people in the ufology community feel, that he's been given a pass to disclose his information. And it seems like, why has he been allowed to present when others haven't? And still
right.
It sounds like a really
exactly.
good interview.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And actually, speaking of like gravity and weird anomalies, Vice published this article, and the headline is, "Massive Gravity Anomaly Caused by Ancient Sea Remnants Deep Inside Earth," says study. This is super fascinating. And it just talks about, in the Indian Ocean features a massive gravity anomaly that has puzzled scientists for years. Now, a new study proposes that an ancient remains of another ocean that sank deep into Earth itself gave rise to the Indian Ocean geode low. I'm not even sure what that means, but IOGL. And that's what they call this anomaly. This Indian Ocean geode low is this weird anomaly thing. And so I don't believe that this is probably the cause of it, but like ocean sank into there, and then it's like creates this like weird, distorting of gravity or something like that. Most likely it's probably some kind of ship that's down there. It could even be from ancient times, but it's just so fascinating that we're talking about this, because there are places on Earth where the gravity is distorted. So there's that place in California, specifically, like you can put a ball at the end of the street where it's uphill, and you can just leave it there and it'll start going uphill. It like just starts rolling uphill instead of going downhill.
Yeah, it seems like the the anomalies, the gravitational anomalies, consistently in a lot of research seem to be connected to spatial and time-based anomalies. Like that's all. It's all interwoven, right? Like you have a lot of people talking about that and about the fact that the Earth's grid and the ley lines of the Earth and the channels, like the Earth's meridians, basically, are creating these things naturally all the time. So, it makes sense to me that if there was ancient technology or extraterrestrial technology, like deep in the ocean, it could itself be causing that, or it could be interacting with the Earth's grid in such a way as to be creating that.
That's a good point too, actually. That's a really interesting point as well. So there's just so much that we don't know. And actually, one of the things that Bob actually brought up on Joe Rogan, he said that one of the craft that they had was an ancient craft that they found at an ancient archaeological site.
Well,
so it had to be in the US. So like my thought was like, maybe this is one of the things they found near the Grand Canyon, because there's actually been a government area that's been sectioned off in the Grand Canyon. And a lot of people speculate that they found something there, which is why they blocked it off. And some people think it was giants, but maybe it was one of these crafts that they found, in the desert or something, or like near the Grand Canyon in some ancient site.
When you hear like theories like, okay, let's say there's like the one narrative that there's giants, and like when you look at the way that they manage these operations, they tend to sometimes float out narratives as psychological operations, like limited hangouts. So it's like the giant narrative, just for that one site, could have been floated by the covert operations trying to keep this suppressed, to keep you away from what's really going on. They use this tactics all the time.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, you're right. They do.
Good old limited hangouts. Classic deep state.
Yeah, seriously. Oh, let's see. Well, man, we got a couple more things. Okay, why don't we show?
I miss COVID. What's the I miss COVID? Oh, is that the Dana Carvey?
Dude, did you see this?
Yes, the Dana Carvey video, which I think is pretty interesting because that's him and David Spade are not normally people that challenge the narrative.
No, definitely not.
So yeah, coming from them, this was interesting.
I think a lot of comedians are really struggling right now because of this exact thing. It's like they're so afraid to offend someone, so afraid to get canceled, so afraid to even talk about anything that's going on. And actually, I'm finding that Saturday Night Live has been pushing it a little bit more with Biden. It's like previously it was like, oh, we're not going to say anything, and it's like that was kind of interesting. So yeah, go ahead and
let's play that video. It's good. It's solid.
This is pretty funny, I have to admit.
I miss COVID. I know. Dude, you know what I knew? There was trouble when anyone that came to our country didn't have to get a vaccine. And I go, if you're telling me I can't go to work, but everyone coming in doesn't have to get one, I go,
well, once we found out, when Fauci said, okay, I'm sorry, but if you've had 2 boosters and 2 vaccines, you can get and give COVID to another guy who's had 5 vaccines and 4 boosters. What's the difference between a vaccine and a booster? I don't know. It's just more vaccine, but booster sounds better. Anyway, a guy with 25 vaccines would get and give COVID to another guy with 25 vaccines. That's why I'm introducing the daily COVID shot. Every day you get a shot. By the time you get to your car, you got no immunity. But it's a beautiful 39 seconds.
Yeah. So good. So on point.
I was so shocked. I was really shocked.
Yeah, it's really shocking. And it's interesting you should bring up Saturday Night Live, because that's the whole point of that show, right? So that's from their show. It's Dana Carvey and David Spade, and they have a show together that is just them talking about the old Saturday Night Live days and having on old Saturday Night Live guests. That's the whole point of the show.
I actually had no idea that they had their own show. So now that I heard that, I'm like, wow, I want to watch this a little bit more. So
this made me look it up. I was like, what has Dana Carvey been doing? Dana Carvey has nothing but podcasts. You go to his Twitter and he just links 3 podcasts.
Well, there's a lot of those guys in that era that are very much against what's going on. And well, actually, we're gonna show a trailer and we come back.
Talk to a trailer.
I'll think about the guy's name. Oh, Rob Schneider just hit me. Rob
Yes.
Schneider. He used to follow us on Edge of Wonder on Twitter. Yeah. So, and he's been very vocal. He's definitely one of the ones that have been vocal. But it's interesting because there's a lot of those guys in that era either have been vocal or silent. And if you're silent, you're pretty much like not in favor of what is going on. So,
yes, absolutely.
yeah, it's very fascinating. So, all right, we're going to show a trailer and when we get back, we'll talk about dinosaurs existing with humans. It's weird.
It's informative.
It's supernatural.
It's Friday Night Live on Rise.tv.
We looked into Microsoft's launch of the next version of ChatGPT, which even has developers wondering if technology is going too far.
Well, everyone is sick of fear and politics, which is why we started this show back in 2018 to talk about the weirdest news and most entertaining information we find each week.
Nickelback might be the reason why we have life on Earth.
The advertising board caused hilarity among many drivers. A real-life Terminator liquid metal T-1000.
Let's laugh at the headlines on Friday Night Live on Rise.tv.
Yeah, we're back.
We are back. So for everybody that's watching us, wherever you're streaming, whether it's on, could be on YouTube or Ganjing World or Rumble, please like and subscribe to our channel. But if you haven't, this is our Rise.tv platform where we have all of our produced shows, fully uncensored shows that you can watch and view on our Rise.tv platform. Rob and I have hundreds of videos, hundreds of series that we've done. Again, this is our live show, and then and then we have our produced show that we some of it we put on social media and public platforms, but the rest of the series is just for our subscribers on Rise. So, and Simon has his show as well.
Yeah, I got lots of stuff on there.
Yeah, you do.
You know, it's interesting. I've been thinking about Worlds Within a lot because I did this one season on education, on the history of public education and like the future of education. And now a lot of that's coming back around. And I recently attended a webinar that was starting to cover a lot of the stuff that I covered back there in Worlds Within, and looking at like the fractal nature of human learning and how fractals actually play a role in the way that we learn.
Yeah.
Super interesting stuff.
Wow. Very cool.
Check it out.
Yeah, so that's all on our Rise.tv. So, and then of course you have your Simon Esler's Dystopian Imaginarium, which is an awesome comedy show that you made, where it's more like it's
like a sci-fi sketch comedy.
Yeah, sci-fi sketch comedy. That's a good way of putting it. It's really great.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah, check it out. That one's good. It's like a real good way to dive into the bizarre experience that was COVID. It's a good filter for it.
Dude, we got to do something like this. I'm like, yeah, this would be cool to do something else. That'd be fun. So
yeah, totally.
All right. Well, coming back to our show before we get into all the MK Ultra stuff. So this is very fascinating, but New York Post, paleobiologists. Now, I don't know why they're not calling them, why they're saying paleobiologists instead of, I can't do
paleontologists.
Yes, thank you. It just like slipped my mind. I was like, dang. But anyway, so what they're claiming in this is like their Flintstones may be considered historical fiction, but there was a journal published in Current Biology. That's the name of the journal, Current Biology. And it actually suggests that human ancestors lived with dinosaurs for a short period of time before they went extinct. What's actually, I mean, for me, and I think for you too, Simon, since both of us have been like, involved with ancient civilization for so long and ancient cultures and everything else, it's like, yeah, this isn't really much of a shock. I mean, if you go back to the Inca stones, they literally have drawings on rocks from like 30,000 years ago that shows people riding dinosaurs. And that's only 30,000 years ago. So, there's a lot of evidence to show that everything we know about dinosaurs may not be the case. So they're saying that in an in-depth analysis of the fossil records for placental mammals, the group, including humans, dogs, bats, and some other things, has provided researchers with the answers to this question. They looked at fossil records and came to the conclusion that these mammals did exist prior to so they're calling it the catastrophic event of, whatever, if it was the asteroid that hit the earth or however they were all like, wiped out. But what Lindsay is showing right now is these Inca stones.
Yeah,
that
that's pretty strong evidence.
Dated 30,000 years ago. Now, mainstream science is like, no, this guy created them, but they are on display in Peru, and you can see them. And I mean, yeah. So I mean,
it's interesting because it's like this is a breakdown then of the narrative in terms of history, and that's what's interesting about it, is that there's some sort of breakdown in the mainstream narrative of history going on with this New York Times post and this study. Is it being allowed, or is it a true discovery that's messing with the narrative?
Yeah, that's what's fascinating about it. It really is. And I know some people that were just out in Arizona at like near Bradford Ranch and whatnot, and there's been reported sightings of like three-toed feet, almost like from possibly even dinosaurs or something like that, or reptilians.
Wow.
We were talking about portals earlier, and one of the theories out there is that we're not seeing like dinosaurs that lived now. Maybe it's some portal that's opening up, and it's like from like back, in like, I'm talking like in the past, time traveling almost. It sounds crazy, like time traveling dinosaurs, but it's not like they know. Maybe they don't even know they're doing it. They're just like walking through a portal, and all of a sudden they're in our time, and then another portal opens up and they're back in their time, and they may have no idea what's going on. But recently, the Weather Channel, I was staying in a hotel one night, and I just happened to see the Weather Channel showing a pterodactyl flying. So they were like, what is this? And they actually got it on video. I have the video somewhere. So
wow.
I'll try to find it here in a little bit and show it for you guys. But I mean, it's serious. Like they were trying to, because it's real, but they're trying to say that it was like some kind of specific bird. And it's like, dude, that seriously looks like a pterodactyl. That's not some like, bald-headed eagle or something like that. So I'll try to find the video. And
this gets to what we were talking about earlier, though, with are there phenomena of this time on Earth that are creating more anomalies like this? More, let's say, weird portals where you have a dinosaur blipping in and out of our time. Maybe that's part of the chaos of this time, of this big shift that's happening. We're moving from one age to another. Who knows? Like, it's possible. I remember looking at some of David Wilcock's research, and he mapped out the way that all these overlapping geometries were actually lining up. If you make the elliptical shape of our solar system into spheres, into like perfect spheres, then you have all these geometries that are twisting within each other, nested, and it creates particular alignments with the points on the geometries. I think about it that way a lot, because that was just kind of a clear way to look at the cycles to me. And I wonder if there are these massive alignments that create phenomena like that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's like probably a good explanation of potentially what could be happening here with all of this. And then same thing in Africa too. They're like a stegosaurus. there's been reported sightings of like a stegosaurus kind of creature in Africa. And this was like a while ago. This was, I think I even heard about this way before Rob and I were doing Edge of Wonder. And I remember looking into it. And I mean, this like African tribe saw it and they clearly drew out what they saw. And it was like a stegosaurus looking thing, you know? So yeah. And it's like,
and or maybe they were looking through a portal and they just saw the dinosaur walking past on the other side of this portal, and then the portal closes. Like, I mean, there's so many
things. Yeah, there really is. So I'm gonna try to find that video for you guys, and then we'll play it here a little bit later.
All right.
Moving on though, we have all this MK Ultra stuff.
Oh man,
Simon, I mean, you've got a lot of stuff here. I know.
We'll see what we have time to do. We don't have to do it all, but I figured I'd put it there and we'll see.
No, dude, it's good. It's good. You know, I'm shocked by every time we do a show and we talk about MK Ultra. There's always people out there that ask, what exactly is MK Ultra?
Right. That's crazy to me. How could you not know at this point? Please.
I'm like, oh,
please keep up.
Yeah, please keep up.
This is so important.
Hey, you in the back. Yeah, you need to keep up.
Inappropriate. Your lack of awareness is inappropriate at this point in history.
Well, I mean, how would you describe MK Ultra in like a nutshell? Like, what would you say?
I mean, this is a level of behavior modification that gets into absolute control of human beings in their bodies, in their thoughts, and the ability to have them not remember the things that they played out. So to control their memories as well. So it is like utter control of human beings on pretty much every level, and all the science that they needed to do just that.
Yeah. And I think and MK is German for mind control. Yeah. Instead of calling it MC Ultra, they just call it MK because they continued on what the Germans were doing in Germany around World War II, and even prior to that, the Russians were also doing experiments. Right. After World War I, they were doing experiments, and then the Germans kind of took over, and then doing all these like experimenting with drugs and yeah,
it was really merging drugs and trauma. Like that was
that was really discovered. Like, yeah, it's kind of like, can you control people through trauma and drugs? Yeah. And then this is 100% official. The CIA, because they actually declassified their own documents stating that they were testing. They were just like, even within the CIA itself, they were just like giving each other doses of like LSD just to see what would happen. Yeah. And then kind of like recording it and whatnot. So it's like you could be working at your cubicle and all of a sudden your partner just like doses you with LSD. And then it's like, you know, just to see how you would respond to that. But
yeah, because one of the requirements, I think this isn't some of the stuff I have, but one of the requirements was that the person doesn't know they've been dosed. That was like one of their stipulations. They cannot know that they're being impacted. And so as long as they had those conditions, they were obsessed with trying to play that out.
Yeah. Someone in the chat mentioned Manchurian Candidate. And if you haven't seen the first one, not the one with Denzel Washington, but the first Manchurian Candidate, I think it came out right before the assassination of JFK. And they actually pulled the movie from the theaters because it was so close to what was going on in real life. And then after like 6 months, they released it back in the theaters. But that movie really spells out clearly how like patsies are being used for weapons and essentially mind control, all of this stuff. It's like because the person may not even know that they're under some form of hypnosis or mind control. And in the movie, I think it was a Queen of Hearts. So when he sees the Queen of Hearts, that's him acting, and he knows he needs to shoot somebody and assassinate. I think it's the president actually in the movie. So,
symbolism is a big thing, like using symbolism and narratives, like certain stories, keywords. And they eventually moved it into tones and things like that, right?
Yeah, tones. That's a big one too.
I got some stuff on that.
And so Stranger Things is a big part of this because so Rob and I did a bunch of episodes related to Montauk Project, and MK Ultra and the Montauk Project really go hand in hand because this was some of the things that they were doing. They were experimenting with kids and children, looking for people with some kind of psychic abilities and trying to see if they can amplify them. And that was also part of all of these experiments. So, and even Bill Clinton came out in the 90s to apologize for the experiments. He didn't say children directly, but he was talking about unwanted people unwillingly participating in these mind control experiments, and he did mention that. And then Michael Aquino, the satanic dude who was in the military, he was one of the. He's a really evil guy.
That guy is a freaky dude.
He was one of the head people, and he literally looks like a vampire. I mean, he's the one with like the weird eyelash or eyebrows.
Yeah, like he has the eyebrows that he twists up.
Yeah. Super weird.
He wants to look like a supervillain. That is his desire.
Yep, there he is, right there. He is a proclaimed Satanist. He's happy to be a Satanist. He was with the guy who founded the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey.
Yes.
And then they had a falling out, and then he formed the Temple of Set, which is another like satanic thing that branches off of that. So
and he is specifically named in the testimony of Kathy O'Brien.
Yes, he is.
You know, she talks about him as being very, very deep into the MK Ultra programs and being, I believe, a programmer is what.
Yeah, well, from my understanding, he was the one that was put in charge of the whole entire thing. So that dude is a very evil guy. There's definitely stories of I mean, even Kathy O'Brien's story. I mean, you know, doing all these things to children. He was the head person to do this. And if you don't believe us, this is where it gets into what Robert Kennedy posted. So okay, so going back to before we go into that, okay, Lindsay's like, maybe we should bring up who's Kathy O'Brien.
True, Kathy O'Brien cannot.
Yeah, we had a really incredible interview with her on Rise TV, and I think Simon, did you talk to her as well?
No, I've just been deeply researching her stuff for a long time now, and yeah, she's amazing. I mean, this is someone who escaped the MK Ultra robotic mind control program and got all her memories back and then published everything and actually testified in front of Congress about everything she knew. And what's crazy about Kathy's story is that she knew like code words from programs and things that she couldn't have known otherwise. So
that's true too.
She talks about the fact that the kind of trauma they induce gives you photographic memory. So you have a perfect memory locked inside of you. And what she discovered through being rescued was that when she unlocked the memories, she had crystal clear memories come through. And so she had all the information of the programs that she had been a part of, all the code words, everything that she had been sort of used as a container to transport and give to other people within these covert networks. Really fascinating stuff. Amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, very, very relevant to now, man. Kennedy dropping this on Twitter is huge. It really puts it into the mainstream.
Yes, Simon, why don't you go ahead and go into this, what this is. And
before I do, this is very interesting. So he drops this article that's new docs link CIA to medical torture of indigenous children and black prisoners. Now, this is really important, as he points out, is that it's from a publication that is actually more sort of left-leaning. We're not looking at a right-leaning publication at all. And in fact, one of the ways we can tell that very overtly is if you go and read the article, it is very focused on racism and racial inequality, and it's coming from that angle, which is fine because a lot of it was based on that. Like these MK Ultra programs, there was severe racism for sure. So let's get into some of what it says. It says in October of 2021, new evidence surfaced linking disappeared indigenous children to MK Ultra experiments conducted by CIA-sponsored researchers. A white Winnipeg resident named Lana Ponting testified in Quebec's Superior Court that in 1958, when she was 16 years old, doctors from the Allen Memorial Institute, a former psychiatric hospital affiliated with McGill and the Royal Victoria Hospital, held her against her will, drugged her with LSD and other substances, and subjected her to electroshock treatments, and exposed her to auditory indoctrination, playing a recording, pointing over and over again that she was either a bad girl or a good girl. Ponting also testified that some of the children I saw there were indigenous, and that she befriended an indigenous girl named Morningstar, who endured many of the same abuses with the added indignity of being harassed because of her race.
I wonder if that's like a nickname or if that was really her actual name.
I mean, it sounds like an indigenous name, to be honest.
I guess it could be. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Keep going.
So during a reprieve from her drug-induced haze, Ponting recalls sneaking over by the cement wall with shovels and flashlights. She and other children had heard rumors that bodies were buried on the property. I believe that some of them would be indigenous people, Ponting told the court. So this drops a really huge truth bomb on like a lot of levels, I think. And one of the big things for me was that it tied to this research from this book called Murder by Decree by Kevin Annett. So Kevin Annett is this Canadian researcher who has been trying to expose all the psychological operations and disinformation coming from the Canadian government surrounding the residential schools. This is it's a great example of a limited hangout. So what really piqued my interest about this article and these new documents proving that there were captured and disappeared indigenous kids from these residential schools was that this is something that Kevin Annett has been trying to talk about for a long time. He's been trying to say that the residential school system was tied to MK Ultra and that these kids were actually funneled out of the residential school system. So I just grabbed this little this part of his book, Murder by Decree, and it's an anonymous phone call that Kevin Annett received on October 2nd, 1998. And it came from a man who claimed to be a retired member of the Canadian Civil Service, but it was an unlisted number. So the caller says, "You're just scratching the surface, but it still has a lot of people concerned." Concerned about what exactly? You had some people from Cooper Island at your thing. You can't let them talk about the German connection. So just to stop right here, Cooper Island is one of the islands where there was a residential school where there was like mass torturing of indigenous kids here in Canada. So he says, what connection? The whole thing, the gentleman's agreement with the Americans and the churches. They provided the kids. The force brought them to us. By force, you mean the RCMP? So that's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Oh, I was going to say the force? What force are they talking about? Okay.
So we're talking about the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, right? That's like the highest level of police in Canada. You know, that's like equivalent to like the FBI. Yeah, that's correct. Cooper Island was isolated and perfect. Lots of Department of National Defense research money went there. And to Calgary and the Lincoln Park thing you mentioned that was bang on. So I'll pause out there. Some people may recognize the Lincoln Park thing. Some people believe that the name Lincoln Park of the band was actually tied to them trying to expose a lot of the atrocities that occurred at Lincoln Park. So apparently there was a base there tied to all of this. Okay.
Lincoln Park's original name was going to be Hybrid Theory, but there was already a band called that, so they had to change their name. And supposedly they chose Lincoln Park because it was like a park in Chicago that's near where they were like living at the time. Yeah, but that could just be like, oh, well, you mean there could be two things there? That's right. There really could be.
Well, I think also because people saw that Chester, the singer, especially, right? Dude. He was involved in trying to produce some content on child sex trafficking.
Yeah,
there's conspiracies around that, but. That's
no. It's and then him and Podesta.
Yes, that whole thing exactly.
And then his mom even making a comment that she hadn't it's like she was dating like some government guy. She didn't really say who it was, but dude, he really does look like Podesta.
He does a lot actually. Okay, so then the caller says to Kevin Annett, it all came from the Pentagon originally. How to make the perfect obedient soldier. The Germans had started up the research before and during the war, and we perfected it. The churches were cooperative from the start. The agreement was they'd provide a quota every year and have them delivered. So he says, are you talking about children from the Indian residential schools? Just so we're clear. Correct. It went on for years, at least from 46 to the 70s, maybe earlier. The Catholics had their own thing going too, but lots of that is classified, known to lots of people. But there will never be an official acknowledgement. No way in hell. That's why we never spoke. This is only for you, understood? He says, okay. He goes, hell, nobody believed you anyway. So I read that years ago. Okay.
Wow.
And this guy's been fighting, like he has been attacked and like suppressed. And like he's been fighting to try to get this information out for so long. You can go if you look up his website, I can't remember what it is, but Murder by Decree, he gives away the book for free. You don't even have to buy it. He wants
No way, really?
Yes. He's so devoted to this work. So that brings us to the whole Canadian mass grave thing. You guys might remember in the summer, I believe summer of 2022, when there was all the stories about all the newly discovered mass graves of Indigenous kids in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So can we play the first 2 minutes of this YouTube clip? So this is a documentary by the Countersignal. And so this is them exploring the whole narrative that came out about these mass graves. And we'll just do the first 2 minutes and then I'll explain why this is so relevant to the MK Ultra.
Wow.
And it's like,
I didn't know about this actually. Well, I knew that the CIA were conducting certain experiments in schools in Canada, and that was one of the documents that got declassified and got exposed. But they didn't really go into detail about what they were doing. So everything that Simon just read, this is more of the details of what those experiments were getting into. So that's really fascinating.
Yeah. So it's like what we're looking at here is there was this whole narrative that all these mass graves were found in Canada of Indigenous kids. Now, this is why this is such a like complex, limited hangout. And this is why I believe that whole narrative was to try to protect from people actually digging into real information that connects the Catholic Church and the Canadian government and all these sources that were actually, they were running the residential schools as a resource for MK Ultra. So basically in this YouTube clip, they'll show, and you guys will remember because there was mass media coverage of this. So I don't know, let's dive into it and then we'll see.
Even the Christian faith in Canada is reaching all-time lows, with churches whose pews were getting sparse now empty due to COVID restrictions. Pastors have been arrested, congregations fined, and now this community, desperate for a place to practice their faith, have been met with a summer of horrors. Terror attacks on their churches like nothing we have seen before in Canada. Not simply a few arsonists or rogue graffiti attacks, dozens of churches under siege by fire, rock, and paint. Over 64 Canadian churches have been vandalized or burned in the last few months. Where did this begin, though? What sparked this great hatred towards the Christian community? Well, unlike other events in history, there was no grand assassination, no kidnapping, surprise bombing, political revolution, or protest. No, this wave of hate began with a single tweet. May 27th this year, the Kamloops Today released a tweet reading, "To Kamloops confirms bodies of 215 children buried at former Kamloops Indian Residential School." Following this tweet, the Vancouver Sun, Global News, CBC, and soon the worldwide press began to take to this story like wildfire. One by one, building on that single article and announcement. And soon the story took a life of its own, evolving into a tale of mass graves. New York Post, Washington Post, CTV News, and even The Sun all published headlines touting horrors of mass graves in Canada, with even political leaders hinting
we can stop there.
at a Canadian.
Wow, dude, this is crazy.
This is nuts, right? Okay, so, and I really encourage people to go check out this documentary. So what happens
I haven't really even heard much about this.
This was nuts, man. There were churches on fire all across Canada. Like they were just burning churches down, and like there was like a lack of investigations. The media here wouldn't cover the attacks on churches all across Canada, it was all instigated by this idea that there were these new mass graves of Indigenous kids uncovered. So in this documentary, they go to the sites where they claim this is happening, and it's all nonsense. There's no mass graves discovered of Indigenous kids at any of the sites they claimed. So it's not that there aren't graves, because as we see in the article that RFK released, there are actually people fighting, there are Indigenous people fighting to get access to sites that they know are graves from MK Ultra experiments.
Wow,
so the Canadian press released this whole false narrative, right? So they released this whole false narrative telling people that there were these discoveries when they weren't the real mass graves. Then they used that to facilitate terrorist attacks on the churches all across Canada, while also creating this limited hangout, making the public feel like the Canadian government is admitting to this. Now, then there was politicians coming out and apologizing, say, we once again apologize. So they have a very sophisticated limited hangout and all these narratives surrounding the Indigenous residential schools thing, and it keeps it disassociated from MK Ultra. So this is like, it's massive that RFK dropped this, because it blows up what the Canadian media and government have been running as an operation here this whole time.
Wow. So you think he, like, I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, hey, look, check out this article. You think he wanted to almost set up like a chain reaction to really what's happening, right?
Yeah, because you have it was very like Antifa style, right? The attacks on the churches, you had like Antifa style people showing up and burning these churches to the ground with like very little law enforcement response, like no real care for it, like just kind of allowing it, which is like, we saw that with the protests across America, with the whole like Black Lives Matter, like burning down huge portions of cities and stuff.
Seriously.
It was so similar to that, where it was just kind of mysteriously allowed, but all instigated by this one false narrative. That documentary, they just go to the sites and they prove that it's like absolutely like those specific sites are not the sites, right? Wow. So pretty crazy, right?
Amazing.
Okay, so then there's this article. Okay, go ahead.
Actually, Simon, before we get into the next article, which is all going to be more about the CIA's legal MK Ultra mind control experiments, we're going to play a trailer, and then we'll get back. We will cover this. So, let's do it. And actually, I found the pterodactyl video too, so we can show that pterodactyl video first when we come back.
My information has been censored for over 30 years. MK Ultra mind control is rooted in our most primitive fear. This handful at the top, they're not like us, and they do not like us. Bohemian Grove is really where this cabal would meet. I was definitely going to be killed there at age 30. I know from my life's experience that without free thought, there's no free will. Love is the greatest healer. It was my motive to heal. People are realizing we're all here for a purpose right now at this pivotal point in humanity's history and future. We need to live the love we are and keep smiling and loving each other. That way, it's game over. We win. They lose.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay, do you want me to keep going, or do you want to do the pterodactyl first?
Okay, since everyone's been waiting for it, why don't I do that? I'm trying to okay, here we go. I think I can get this. So again, this is what was on the Weather Channel. And they were just showing this on the Weather Channel, and they had different people talking about what they thought it was.
That's so obvious.
And they were like trying to say that it was just this one specific bird. I can't remember what bird they were talking about. Maybe like a crane or something like that. And they're like, yeah, I think it's like a crane. I'm like, dude, that is definitely a pterodactyl. Dude.
Yeah.
Look
at it.
So It's so crazy.
Wow, that's great. That's such a good video. Time portal. He came through a time portal.
Yeah, well, that's what I started thinking about. Like, wow, maybe
go.
it's possible, right?
That's where I would go with it for sure.
Crazy stuff.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Let's get back into the depths of this here. So there's a 2018 article called "The Truth About the CIA's Illegal MK Ultra Mind Control Experiments Using Drugs, Hypnosis, and Electronic Devices." This is a good one because it has to do with another huge dump of documents that this guy obtained. And it ties into a lot of what is in the RFK article on Twitter. So number one, it talks about how criminals who are awaiting trial, like in hospitals, they experimented on them to see if they could basically mind control them and then send them into trial to see if they would admit to more stuff in the trial under these mind control conditions. But one of the crazy quotes, and this really gets into it, is they were interested in developing ways to cause amnesia in humans using experiments, quote, no matter how weird, inconclusive, or unusual. Okay.
Whoa.
And this gets into, I think, a big deal of like where we are today. It goes on to detail how they were looking to find ways of developing hypnotic speaking techniques which would control the minds of large audiences and heighten group susceptibility.
Crap. Dude, and that's exactly what people are saying of what's happening with the Taylor Swift concerts. People are like having these like amnesia where they're like, they literally, it's like they can remember being there and the whole thing is just certain parts. It's like, for example, some people were saying, I don't remember her playing this song, like a specific song, and she did play it and they have like no memory of it. And it's not just one person. It's like collectively a whole group of people that are going to her shows are forgetting parts of the show.
See, and Roseanne was talking about this recently. She's saying that the CIA got into Hollywood and the entertainment industry, and they are using Hollywood and the entertainment industry to run operations. She was recently going on about this in an interview. So,
I mean, and why better than do it at the biggest person, that exists right now, Taylor Swift. I mean, there's more people seeing her than anybody on the face of the planet right now.
Well, and the whole focus on large audiences and heightened group susceptibility also gets into the mass formation psychosis phenomenon as outlined by Robert Malone, and everything that we've been going through collectively over the past few years. It gets into some of that too, in my opinion. So they wanted to do experiments which were, quote, too dangerous, too shocking, too unusual for routine testing. That's what would be of interest to them. That's a 1956 memo.
Wow.
Here's another crazy thing. They also researched electric fish who can zap each other with electricity in a bid to create a super soldier who could do the same thing.
Electric fish?
Yes, they were trying to create super soldiers that could electrify people.
What the heck, dude? They were literally trying to create like super villains in this thing.
For real. This is in the documents.
Electro is real.
And this article is great because it's this guy who runs, I think it's called the Black Vault. He's been fighting with the CIA to get these documents for years. He's made something like 90,000 FOIA requests to try to get these documents. He's just been going hard up against them. So anyways, this is what's really interesting. They were implanting electronic devices into animals to see whether electronic impulses can essentially control the brain. And most worrying, John says, is that there's still at least 1,245 pages missing, which could mean there is even more disturbing. Because every time he wins a fight with the CIA and gets another batch of documents they've been withholding, it gets worse and worse and it reveals crazier and crazier things. So he's like, dude, what is in those 1,200 extra documents that they're because basically they gave him a trove and said, this is everything. And then he went through it and he was like, there's thousands of documents missing. What are you talking about? And so he's been in this battle to get the whole trove that they claimed they gave him. So why?
This is crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. So he believes this means it's all still taking place, like, to an extent.
Which could be. And honestly, there's this whole thing about, especially X-Men, when you really look at like X-Men comics, and they really came out in the 60s. You look at some of what's happening with some of the Marvel people, and then even the movies coming in now. A lot of people, I mean, especially Winter Soldier, is all about MK Ultra and Project Paperclip.
Yep.
And so a lot of people now, you know, of course, when these all came out, it's just like, wow, this is cool and different and whatever. But now it's like, dude, everything these comic books were talking about is actually what has been going on, like from super soldiers to mind control, to like having special abilities, super normal abilities, to you know, experimentation, and then even like Professor X's Cerebro thing, you know, and then it's like coming into all of this, because we were kind of using that as an example of what was happening with Montauk, and how that they were trying to amplify people's psychic abilities using, you know, the antennas that they have at Montauk Project. So
exactly, and you can tell by the quotes that I'm saying nothing is too strange, too weird, too dangerous, too unreliable. They're like, everything is on the table. That was their attitude, right?
Wow, dude, this is really amazing.
It's crazy. Okay, so what we're looking at here, though, is that they essentially have 3 techniques. Now we can see from everything that we've gone through, they have 3 ways. They have trauma, they have drugs, and they have like electronic interference. And those are like the 3 things that essentially the CIA not only sort of used, but became relatively successful with. You know, because like this is one of the other things that he brings up in this article. He's like, they were relatively successable. It doesn't record that they had a ton of failures. It shows that there was like a high success rate with a lot of this stuff. So this is interesting, because what I'm going to take us back to is when this finally all came out, right? Like around the time of like, it was like 1977, when this all came out and they actually had to have the hearings on it, and MK Ultra got exposed, right? You had the joint hearing before the Select Committee on Intelligence and the Subcommittee on Health and Scientific Research of the Committee on Human Resources in the United States Senate, which is the whole focus of this was Project MK Ultra, the CIA's program of research and behavioral modification. So this is from August 3rd, 1977. And so this was this meeting where they actually sat down. They were like, what were you doing? The public deserves to know. And they get into it and they go through some of the documents. So in one of the documents, there is a request for support of research on the mechanism of brain concussion. Okay, it says this is a request for financial support for research on the mechanism of brain concussion. And they talk about the progress made to date under the above contract. And they summarize it with a number of things. They have research facilities, that's A, and then B is personnel. Check out what they say about personnel, because this has to do with the academic institutions and research institutions that the CIA was using. So for example, like here in Canada, you had, I think it was McGill University. You had universities and labs all over Canada and America that the CIA put funding and projects into. So this is what they're talking about. Quote, both full-time technical personnel and part-time professional research personnel have been acquired and indoctrinated relative to their specific function. So they're talking about having indoctrinated personnel in these institutions all over North America to perform their experiments. And this is fully disclosed in front of the US Senate in 1977. Wow. So then they get into the technical progress made under the current contract. They're looking at specialized instrumentation and numerous testing techniques. They're looking at like all these different ways of creating what they're calling this brain concussion. Because what they were fascinated by was when people get certain kinds of concussions, they get amnesia. They can't remember what happened before the concussion.
That's so true.
Right? So they wanted to duplicate that in an artificial way without actually hitting the person. They wanted to see if they could create the conditions of a concussion artificially so that someone would have amnesia of what had just happened. So like one of the things that they created was a skull, a simulated skull that was a glass, and it was filled with fluid. And they would like concuss this or like fire vibrations at it. They would do all these things to this simulated glass skull to try to create these conditions. You had sound waves propagated in the air. So they were using sound waves to try to mimic it. All of this was like different measurements and ways to try to recreate the conditions to establish like what they wanted, which was these amnesia states where they could impact the brain and create control of people's memories. So they didn't want to create physical trauma. They wanted to avoid that. And they wanted to get into ways of creating the impact and they got into what was called resonance cavitation. Okay. And there were two ways that they were looking at doing this: a blast wave propagated in the air, or number two, physical excitation with a mechanical driver or horn tuned to the resonant frequency of the head. Okay.
What does that mean exactly?
Okay, so everything has its own resonant frequency, right? Everything
Yes.
in the world has its own resonant frequency. You've seen this where, you know, those videos of bridges that just start going crazy, and what they found was that the way that would happen was that they would find the resonant frequency of the bridge, and they would vibrate the bridge at its resonant frequency, and it caused the whole bridge to wobble and even like come apart, right? So this is true for everything. Right?
Yeah, and it's like you could do it. It looks like you could do the opposite too. If you can do it for destruction purposes, or you can do it for like aligning our bodies even with a certain frequency. Like, for example, in the memory of water, the research that we did, they found that by using even just having that frequency of medicine, without even putting medicine in the body, but just finding that frequency and aligning like your sick body, they could actually heal your body through this way. But yeah, this is exactly what Simon is talking about here.
Okay, so this is what the CIA was looking at doing to the human head, to the skull, and to the brain.
Crap.
Okay, they wanted to figure out how to create these artificial concussions
5G.
by developing technologies that would do this to the brain. Okay, so that gets into, you know, technologies at a distance, or technologies that are actually inserted into the brain. That's right. This is why soldiers stop marching in order when they go over a bridge, to stop from creating that phenomenon. So this is like a super, super real phenomenon. So then we get into like, what is mainstream in terms of technology that can get into the brain, control brain signals, that can get like right down into those depths. So there's this study called Converting Brain Signals into Action. Okay. So this is a study this is like a mainstream study. They were exploring two different computerized chips that convert brain signals into action simply through the patient's thinking about the action. So there's these two scientists, these PhDs, there's a professor of neurobiology at this medical school. They built a collaborative research program to develop brain-computer interface devices that interpret the brain's still intact command abilities to convey them to high-tech prosthetics and assistive devices. So the whole construct for this was, this is for people who have prosthetics, who have lost limbs. We're going to try to figure out how to implant chips in their brains so that they can, with their own brain, control their prosthetics. So that's the medical usage that this is all about, right?
Right. Kind of what Elon is trying to do with Neuralink, you know.
It gets into that, right? So it's like this electrode grid is placed beneath the skull and on the surface of the brain's movement controlling motor cortex. A computer system interprets the electrical impulses in the brain captured by the micro ECOG technology, then converts the signals into movements controls in virtual environments. So that's one of the technologies. And then they're also developing a second, they've developed this. This is an old article. It's an old study I had to pull from the Internet Archive. It was gone on the research site, of course. It doesn't exist there anymore. I know. Yeah. So the second one is this brain interface technology that's like a microarray, an intracortical microarray. And this device enables users to control movement with thoughts, but with a higher resolution and potentially greater control because of the tiny chips, how small the chip is, right? Like it's so small, but it goes deeper into the brain. Anyway, so this whole thing shows that there is mainstream research, okay? And what's interesting is that they actually, it says here, the team received approval from the US Food and Drug Administration to test the intracortical array on humans, and it's now supported by the US Department of Defense. And they also stated that all this research was also, it involved DARPA. Okay, so they also got support from DARPA. So you have this thing that claims it's about healing people who lost limbs and helping them with prosthetics, but you have involvement and funding from both DARPA and the Department of Defense. Okay, so anyways, I think all of this is really, really, really strong evidence that if you have that, and that's like recent, And then you have the fact that the CIA was overtly trying to do this. They were trying to get into brains and create this level of manipulation with the brains. Then you're really getting into what is going on now. Like, it's not just that they're doing the tests right now. Like, that's one of the things the article that RFK drops is like, are they still doing these studies and tests now? No, I think they have successsual programs that are being run right now. That's the wrong question, you know? How are they applying it overtly?
Right.
You know,
is it through 5G? Is it through
exactly
vaccines? Is it through music, sound waves? I mean, all of the above. Satellites.
What resonant frequencies are we surrounded by that actually affect go into the resonance of the human head specifically? And then, you know, then you look into the fact that you have that triad, right? You have the technological intervention, you have the trauma, and you have the drugs. And it's interesting because you have all these people, all these different shooters, okay, from all these like school shootings. So the Parkland shooting and like Adam Lanza, Stephen Kamerchek, and Cho Sing Hui at Virginia Tech, all these different shootings, all of them were on very specific psychotropic drugs. And I think a majority of them talk about hearing voices in their heads. Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's a very common thing.
It's very, very common. And it's not to imply that that's the case with all of these, but it just means like, what are we looking at in terms of the ways these programs might be functioning? It's just a very open-ended question, you know? And I think, you know, we had a recent event in Canada here where there was a New York Post reported on this, that there was a student or a prior student that came into this university and attacked people in a gender studies class. And I think, you know, this is another one of these weird situations where this was like a seemingly healthy person who was just conservative and didn't agree with gender ideology. He graduates, disappears for a year, and then suddenly comes back and he's like totally unchecked, starts wielding a knife in this classroom. And what's weird is all the reporting on it, they don't talk about like mental health.
No one ever does.
They don't talk about mental health.
No, they don't. And the other aspect of it is that most of these people are getting some kind of help, and who their doctor is or who their like, you know, shrink or whatever is never ever brought up. You know, what kind of medications they're on, who prescribed those medications is never brought up. You know, and these are very important questions. And I would think that, you know, if you're like looking into this and researching it, you're wanting to know, like, okay, you know, where was this person 4 months ago? Why is all social media accounts taken down?
Okay, so this guy's social
like
media
a Trump
account,
supporter, you know,
I look into it. This guy's social media account was created in 2020. In 2020, he has no posts until June 16th, 2022, and they're all on that one day. All of his posts are just of his graduation, and that's it. And it's so weird because that's the only thing that's in all the articles about him, just that he recently graduated. So the only thing that's on his Instagram, this weird empty Instagram account, is photos of him just graduating, even though he graduated a year ago and he's returning to the campus for all of this. And it's like he said, like, we should just be able to ask these questions. Was he getting psychiatric help over that year that he was gone? You know, if the CIA admitted in 1977 that they had indoctrinated people in professional institutions to perform their tasks, this is open evidence, then we should be able to know this information. And the mental health issue should be brought up. It's really quite atrocious to me that all the coverage about this just says he was a Christian conservative who didn't agree with gender studies, trying to create this idea that Christian conservatives who don't agree with gender studies are kind of like all potentially going to whip out knives and go crazy. Like, it creates a very dangerous narrative, in my opinion.
100%, you know, and again, it just brings up a lot of questions and a lot of concerns. And of course, you know, the media doesn't want to focus any attention to this. It's just like whatever they want to report on and focus on that. So you're not asking all these other questions and focusing on really what's going on behind the scenes with all of this. So
it's narrative warfare. Anyways, that's the end of my
it.
my little MK Ultra dive. That's the context I
Dude,
wanted to give everything.
This is great, man. This is great stuff. You did amazing with all of this. Yeah, there's so much I even learned through this. So really cool. Well, before we get into our Q&A, we want to talk about a couple things real quick. One is the Elon versus Zuck.
So amazing. It's so amazing. I'm
so
excited.
It's possible that this could be held in the Coliseum. I mean, this is
That's so amazing.
Yeah, it was I Elon is such a troll, and I have no idea if he was being serious about it or not. But he made a tweet because somebody, I think it was Italy, that was like, "Hey, we will offer the Coliseum," and Elon tweeted that there was some chance that this could happen within the Coliseum. So,
how amazing! I mean, it was Dana White, I think, was saying that. He believes that if this goes down, it'd be one of the most watched things in the world, but it could raise millions of dollars for something. I mean, it could be used for such positive things.
It could, actually. It really could. And Elon has already been training. There was a video of him training already. So, and then there's multiple very famous fighters and all kinds of people that reached out to Elon saying like, "Hey, I would love to train you, if you want to do this." So this is very fascinating. Very, very fascinating.
This makes me believe that we're on the best timeline. It really does.
I mean, whoever thought in a million years these two tech giants would actually literally bout it out in a ring, or Coliseum, no less. I mean, they might as well have it in a Coliseum. I mean, nothing has been in the Coliseum for like 1,500 years. I guess there's been like some small things here and there, but they've never had like a fight like this or any other major event that took place. So,
oh my God, the memes.
This
would be that will come from this.
This would be so hilarious. This. I guess everyone's looking at this as like this would be one of the greatest, most watched things probably on television in 100 years. So that'd be very fascinating. Let's see what happens with that.
So, we also have all this stuff going on in France. Man, it is lit up in France right now.
Yeah, it really, really is. A massive amount of protests happening. There was like 600 people that were arrested. This is in a small suburb of Paris. Nanterre, something like that. How to pronounce it? I'm not 100% sure, but it was it was a police officer that shot a teen, and massive amount of protests are happening. Like I said, about 600 people. And 600 people have been arrested. What's crazy is that the Prime Minister of France have asked social media to take down videos like this. Whoa. So what we're seeing right here is a car kind of smashing into like a mall, and all these people are running in there and just looting everything. It's like it's really bad what happened. I mean, I've been in Ferguson. I was literally in Ferguson at the height of the protests in Ferguson. I've covered protests in a lot of major cities in the US, DC and New York, LA a little bit. So, and what's crazy is that when I've talked to police, the people that are arrested, none of them are ever from the area. Like New York City, there was like 400 people that got arrested, and
I remember that. Yeah, they're always from like out of state.
Yeah, all of them were out of state. Most people don't want to burn down their own city or do anything crazy. So it's just so weird what is going on over there. And I think it's more of like an excuse. There's a lot of fear that this could be the start of oh my God, what happened? The beginning of communism really happened in France. What the heck?
Oh yeah.
What was it called? Oh my gosh. It just totally slipped my mind.
I am not going to remember.
In the 1800s. What was when all the protests happened in
French Revolution?
Yes. Okay. Sorry. I should not. I'm like, man, sorry, my mind
It's
is
crazy. This police car just driving through. Oh my god, dude, this is not good.
People are asking what they're protesting. This is not a protest. This is a riot. This is destruction. There's no protest here. Protest is people marching in the streets peacefully and, trying to bring awareness to what
it seems like orchestrated chaos.
This is orchestrated chaos, 100%.
Yeah, it's so reminiscent of the Black Lives Matter stuff, and even what we were talking about before with the burning of the churches across Canada. You really have these suddenly, like, they said they were protests, right? It was the same thing. It's just people are just so upset. They're so upset. Dude. No,
so many buildings have been burned down. This is insane. This is super insane. This is heavily orchestrated. Yeah, and guaranteed.
You're saying it's over a teen's death.
Yeah. Over a teen's death. Nonsense. Yeah, I mean, it's a police officer, shot a teen. Okay. I mean, that's, but is that cause for burning down your city?
No. It just would not. It would not create this. No. So what you have then is like you had an operation ready to go, and that was the cue. Yeah. That's what we're looking at. This is 5th generation warfare at its finest.
But according to CNN, it's all peaceful, peaceful protest. It's still fires, but it's still peaceful. They're just setting them peacefully on fire.
Yes, it's mostly peaceful. Mostly peaceful. Incredible.
Peacefully burning the city down and stealing whatever they want. There you go. So crazy. So crazy. All right, you guys. Well, we're a little bit over, but we're going to jump over to Rise TV, where we will have our top 10 weirder news of the week. Everything from an alien figure found to an ancient Greek altar that was unearthed. And we even have evidence of what possibly could be like a Loch Ness monster in Canada, actually. Ooh. And a Rocket Man delivery service. So all of that's going to be super fascinating. And we're also going to have our Dig Deep live Q&A where you get to ask us your questions directly in our live chat. So we're going to leave wherever we're streaming: Rumble, Facebook, Ganjing World, Twitter, YouTube, and we'll head over to rise.tv. So for just $9.99 a month, you can come over and support our work. So please do that. We have so much content over there. It's never ending. It's only $9.99. And, we have a large community over there. And of course we have our own live chat to go with it as well. So
it's all sorts of content that escaped the purge. Really.
That's a good way of putting it. So.
Really, it's quite exciting. It's like a vault that escaped the purge.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. All right, you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you over on Rise TV.
See you there.
Just a reminder that we're not having a show on Tuesday, and happy 4th of July.
Thank you, Lindsay. I forgot to bring that up. Yes, it is July 4th on Tuesday. So Rob and I will not be here on Tuesday, but we'll have our show on next Friday. So thank you.
A vast secret history. A lost ancient civilization. An empire they tried to erase. Tartaria's hidden past is just as fictional as Atlantis. Or is it? Humanoid giants. Magical creatures that shouldn't exist. Dogmen. Centaurs. Magicians. And evil spirits. Why did the Soviet communists remove all traces of Tartaria from their books? Why was it so important to wipe Tartaria off the face of the earth? Take a glimpse into the truth of the past. You were never supposed to know.
So, did Genghis Khan's ancestors and the Tartarians really discover America? Was Tartaria a global civilization?
Forgotten maps. The journals of Marco Polo. Ancient structures. Evidence of advanced technology. Edge of Wonder brings you Tartaria.
Simon, we actually have quite a few people asking. Well, there's two specific questions. One,